Joker tells the story of Arthur Fleck, a mentally unstable aspiring comedian who, through a combination of bad luck and a society that just won't give him a break, goes on a downward spiral into insanity to become a psychotic anarchist who dresses up like an evil clown, who is also based on a character from a comic book, but shh, they don't want us to think about that. Going in, I had a very love-hate relationship with this movie. On the one hand, it's recently been under attack by SJWs and radical leftists, so much so that the studio has actually started to push back against them. And how often do you see that in Hollywood? Normally, you'd expect the studio to kowtow to these nut jobs, not stand up to them. So that made me really want to support this movie. On the other hand, the director Todd Phillips made some comments in an interview prior to the release that really rubbed me the wrong way. And I have a snippet of it here. This is an exact quote. "Look at this as a way to sneak a real movie in the studio system under the guise of a comic book film. It was literally like, let's make a real movie with a real budget and we'll call it expletive deleted Joker." That's what it was. And what I took from these comments is that Todd Phillips really didn't respect the genre he was working in, thought the idea of making a comic book movie was stupid, that it wasn't real, which seemed very disrespectful to the genre and anyone who enjoys it. And that made me not want to support this movie. So as I sat down to watch it, I had a lot of conflicting feelings. And now having seen it, I still do. Here's the short version. Joker is a great film. It's also a film that seems genuinely embarrassed by the source material it's inspired by, and goes out of its way to downplay any connection to that source material as much as possible. So I think the more attached you are to the comics, the cartoons, and what have you, the more issues you may have with this movie. If you're able to separate it from all that stuff and just view it on its own, there's a lot more to appreciate. First and foremost, Joaquin Phoenix. Holy shit, Joaquin Phoenix is fantastic in this movie. If their goal was to make a comic book movie that could win an Oscar, they may have succeeded, because if his performance is not Oscar-worthy, I don't know what the hell is. He really transformed himself for this role. He lost a ton of weight, so the character looks really emaciated and unhealthy, so much that it's downright uncomfortable to watch him, because he's been really put down by people and society, and this has had a physical effect on him as well as a mental one, and that really comes across in his body language and his mannerisms. But while physically he looks like a depressed guy who just can't catch a break, mentally, he's just a whirlpool of emotions that are barely under control at the best of times. And what makes this performance so damn impressive is how Phoenix conveys these emotions all at once. There are so many scenes where you feel so bad for the poor guy that you just want to hug him and tell him things are going to be okay, because it's just heartbreaking the stuff that keeps happening to him. But at the same time, you feel very unnerved and almost terrified of what he might do. When we meet Arthur Fleck in this movie, he's already just one bad day away from going completely off the rails. And then he has bad day after bad day after bad day after bad day, and then he has a good day, which is a bad day for a lot of other people. So he goes from depressed, sad, confused, and helpless to powerful, happy, insane, and chilling over the course of the movie. Sometimes he does it all in one scene. Joaquin Phoenix has got to be the Oscar frontrunner for this role. If he's not, there's something wrong with the Oscars. More than usual, I mean. And the filmmaking is outstanding too. The whole look of the film seems to reflect Arthur's mental state. Everything is very drab and dirty and kind of unorganized. There's a lot of dull colors at the beginning when he's at his lowest, but once he's made his transformation, you see him making this big, grand entrance into bigger and brighter colors like you saw in the trailer. And there's some really clever symbolism, how you'll often see him trudging up this big staircase looking like the most miserable person on earth, but once he's become Joker, his whole demeanor and body language suddenly change, and then he's gleefully dancing down the stairs like he's having the time of his life. You're watching his literal descent into madness, and once he starts to make that descent, there are some very brutal and chilling moments. And I have to respect the movie in that regard, because it doesn't pull any punches. It grabs you by the throat in those moments and doesn't let go. Now, where I take issue with the movie is how it views the source material. The studio or the media might call this a comic book movie, but I don't think that's right. I don't even think that was their intention when making it. It's more accurate to call this an original story very loosely based on a comic book character. Arthur Fleck might be called Joker, but he doesn't resemble any incarnation of the Joker I'm familiar with. The Joker is supposed to be scary, sure, but he's also funny and charming and even kind of a dork sometimes, whereas this version is more intense, brutal, tragic, and a rage of violent, conflicting emotions. Still a bit of a dork, but in a much darker way, so this was quite a departure. Of the few other characters from the comics that appear, the only one that plays any kind of significant role is written very out of character, seemingly for no other reason than because they needed him to act that way for the story to work. And technically it does take place in Gotham City, but if you changed the names of 2 or 3 characters and locations, it honestly could have taken place anywhere. So the movie definitely goes out of its way to distance itself from the comics as much as possible. And the end result is a movie that is brilliantly sad, tragic, nuanced, disturbing, frightening, and does everything it possibly can to prevent its audience from thinking about how it's based on a funny book where a guy dresses up in a bat costume to fight crime. It's probably the best movie and character study you've ever seen about how a depressed, mentally ill, failed comedian lashes out at the society that ruined him and becomes a psychotic, murdering anarchist who dresses up like a clown. What it's not is a movie about the Joker. I think what they did here was make a film that, rather than embracing how it's a part of the comic book movie genre, uses that genre as a vehicle to tell an original story about original characters, some of whom have the same names as characters from a comic book the audience may have read. Fanfiction Oscar bait is what it is. The reviews would have you believe that Joker has elevated comic book movies to some kind of art form, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, but the impression I got is that it did this out of contempt for the source material, not out of love for it. This film is a dark, brutal, deeply cynical look into the mind of a very disturbed man. And as fascinating as it is, somewhere along the way they seem to forget that the Joker can also be fun. So I'm not saying they missed the point, I'm just saying that this Joker didn't feel like the Joker. And when you consider how Joker is not part of the DCEU, does not adhere to any kind of continuity whatsoever, goes out of its way to downplay any connection to the comics, you have to ask yourself, what exactly is this? And I guess it's an Elseworld story. And I think the studio could have saved themselves a lot of confusion and a lot of questions if they just had the foresight to brand it as one in the first place. So my final thoughts are that I think Joker is a tremendous film. I think Joaquin Phoenix deserves all the awards. I just wish the movie didn't act like it was slumming it by technically being in the same genre as Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man Far From Home, and the Dark Knight trilogy. Tell me what you thought of Joker down in the comments section. Smash that bell icon and follow me on Twitter using the link in the description box so you'll always know when new videos get uploaded. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe because the YouTube algorithm is more frightening than the Joker will ever be. Thank you so much for watching, stay tuned, and I'll be back soon with more videos. Over. Out.